From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and ahead today, K-State's Gregg Ibendahl is back, this time to share his interpretation of the USDA's Net Farm Income Report released yesterday, and how those trends noted in the report relate to the economic state of Kansas farmers and ranchers currently. Then, from the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Sandy Johnson looks ahead to another livestock disease outbreak simulation that will take place in Kansas in mid-December. It'll allow agricultural agencies and producer organizations to further evaluate this state's ability to successfully respond to any such outbreak. Further ahead this week's horticulture segment, K-State's Ward Upham will cover the basics on holiday poinsettia selection and care. All this and more next on Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
Well, yesterday, the U.S. Department of Agriculture ushered out what could be considered a preliminary overview of the agricultural economy ahead of the department's annual Ag Outlook Forum, which will take place in early 2018. We've invited back K-State Research and Extension agricultural economist Gregg Ibendahl to offer his reaction to the numbers and what they might signify not only nationally, but how they might relate to our current economic status agriculturally here in Kansas. But about this report, Greg, it's basically to give a comprehensive idea of where we stand in the farm economy.
Yeah, it's basically to kind of show where our net farm income is for this year and maybe give some outlook, maybe what it might be for next year. So, my take on the report is that I think the USDA is kind of thinking we may have bottomed out as far as net farm income because they're showing just a little bit of an uptick in net farm income for 2017.
In fact, they were talking of a 2.7% increase over 2016 numbers. And how do they arrive at that figure? What are they looking at that suggests this modest improvement?
Well, they kind of build an income statement based on the different sectors of the economy for farming. So they look at revenue and the expense side both, and then they break the revenue side down into different crops and livestock components and look at those. So, I mean, it's really almost a tale of two different commodities. If you look at the crop side, I don't think they're showing any kind of increase there. But if you look at the livestock side, they're showing a little better situation thanks to some higher beef prices than what we expected and thanks to some good exports going in this year. So the beef side definitely is a higher revenue side than what the crop side is compared to what it was last year.
This, again, slight improvement in net farm income as they're talking about here. It's, to lend a number here, $63.2 billion nationally. You still compare that back to recent years where it's fallen short of those previous years in many respects.
Yeah, if you look at the USDA provided like a 20-year history of net farm income, and if you look at what it was they're forecasting for this year, we're kind of at that bottom level of what those numbers have gone over for the past 20 years. And if you look at our KFMA numbers, we're kind of the same way. We're kind of at a level of net farm income where we really haven't seen back since the 80s here. So certainly, I mean, we may have stabilized at what we are, but the level is pretty low. And if you compare that to like the last 5 or 10 or 15 or 20-year history of net farm income, we're well below that here. So, I mean, where we at is at a pretty low level right now.
As you noted, and as the USDA identified it, the tale of two commodities. The crops side, basically it's a factor of cash receipts being lower for crops, right?
Prices haven't improved any. We did see some record yields this year. I think they're still forecasting, at least I know, record yields for corn this year, and I think pretty close for soybeans. So, that always helps things out to have good production. But the other side of the revenue side is, in addition to having the quantities, you need the price, and we just haven't seen that improvement on prices yet.
What did the USDA say in this report about the costs of crop production, though? That's
that's still really been a kind of a positive for most farmers. I think, though, we're actually maybe starting to see that change. So really, the end of 2016 going into 2017, we've really seen some pretty low input prices for most farmers. Certainly fuel has been at levels we really haven't seen for a long, long time. So that has helped things. Fertilizer prices have been very attractive. They're probably at 5 to 10 year lows as far as fertilizers. So, and then we haven't really seen any increases in most of the other commodities either here, inputs. So really, farmers, their price situation as far as expenditures really hasn't been all that bad. I think that may be starting to change though, because if we look at what happened with fuel prices at the second half of 2017, we saw a pretty good jump in diesel fuel prices. I think probably at least 50 cents a gallon here. So that's starting to affect farmers now. That will certainly affect their fuel prices going into next year. And the thing to keep in mind with fuel prices is that there's a very strong correlation between the oil price and what farmers pay for fertilizer. So I think going into next year, even though fertilizer prices have been really good, I think you're going to start to see fertilizer prices bounce back a little bit higher next year as well, thanks to oil prices being higher.
So that'll be something to keep tabs on very closely, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I would, definitely if you're a farmer, I would start keeping an eye on fertilizer, and maybe, if you see some opportunities to buy some, go ahead and take that under. I think you start to see right now the P and K side hasn't really increased very much, but certainly the nitrogen side has started to increase a little bit.
Within this report as well, the USDA commented on the equity situation in farming and ranching. That's key, as everybody well knows, to solvency and continuing the operation. And what did the USDA have to say there?
Well, I think they were a little bit optimistic on the whole balance sheet situation. So they looked at farm equity actually increasing about 2 to 3% for this year, but they're basing that on higher land values. I don't think if you look at the land values in Kansas, we're seeing that kind of increase. So, yeah, I don't think our farmers here in Kansas are going to see that 2% or 3% increase in equity that the USDA is showing. In fact, we actually may show a little bit of a decrease if land values have continued downward here. And the other point they make is that the debt situation has increased about 3%. Well, I mean, if you factor that in with maybe there's a 3% equity increase, that may be okay. But like here in Kansas, if we're looking at a higher debt level and no equity, that's a bad thing for farmers. I think what you're really seeing happening is, farmers have been taking on some extra debt to meet family living, and that's kind of end up rolling into the long-term land side of things for debt, which is where I think you're seeing the debt increase come. That to me, that's a troubling trend. It's not very much yet, but I think that's something to keep an eye on going forward.
We don't want to rest too heavily on the notion that the debt will be offset by the equity, in other words.
Yeah, that was got us in trouble during the first farm crisis back in the 80s was that, farmers really didn't take any extra debt during that time frame once the crisis was underway. What really happened was what made those debt-to-asset ratios jump up during the 80s was the fact that land values declined, whereas debt stayed the same, and made those debt-to-asset numbers look really, really bad here. So from my perspective, the debt-to-asset ratio is really a trailing indicator if there's a problem or not. We're not going to see that ratio really jump up until we've actually been in a real bad situation for a couple of years. So, our debt-to-asset ratio doesn't look bad now, but, it's not going to look bad unless we really get a bad situation here. So we can't look at that as a guiding ratio to go by.
Yeah. Greg, something else that the USDA noted in this report, and don't know what it might shed some light on here, but it did bring up that the actual farm program payments that might be realized here in 2017, although crop prices are low, those ARC and PLC payments, broadly speaking now, will likely be lower as well, which is an interesting twist.
Yeah, all that goes back to the choices farmers made back when the first bill first came out. So I don't know how many farmers would like to go back and maybe redo that here. So, this could be a big factor going into the next farm bill discussion is, how does all that play out? Certainly, we would expect a farm bill we would like us to pay us more money when net farm income is low, and we're not seeing that's kind of working the opposite right now. So, that may guide discussions going forward in the next farm bill.
It's worth noting here that the Kansas Farm Management Association from here at K-State is going to be in the midst of putting together here over the coming months its report on net farm income here specifically in the state for 2017. So we are resting on what was reported last spring for 2016 net farm income. Do you see that the USDA's report parallels what we see currently as per KFMA data?
Well, I would say there's a strong correlation between the two, although it's certainly not a perfect correlation. So, the USDA is looking at things being a little higher as far as net farm income. I would say my first take on this is that probably going to be the case for Kansas too, because we do have more livestock than what the USDA looks at nationally. So I would say that we're probably going to look a little better just from that perspective. Mm-hmm. Again, it's not going to be, we're certainly at a real low level here. If you look at our net farm income from last year, it's probably close to the low of our 40-some plus years of computerized history here. So I think we're actually at a lower point as far as net farm income compared to what the USDA is from the start here. So really for Kansas, I would hope the only place we could go is up. But, like I said, you never know whether these things work out sometimes.
If it weren't for livestock receipts, we would truly be in a world of hurt in Kansas.
Yeah, I think so. I think we would probably actually be showing another decrease from what it was last year. But, I think the livestock will actually bring that up a little bit. So I'm looking actually, my prediction, if you force me to make one, I would say our net farm income for Kansas from our KFMA day would probably be a little bit higher than what it was last year.
Mm-hmm. Main message taken away from all of this as you look at the broad economy agriculturally seems to be on the precipice of potentially difficult times.
Well, I would say we're probably in the midst of difficult times right now. I guess my take on this is we may have bottomed out, but we're certainly that's a pretty low level to bottom out at here. So it's going to be a tough year, again, I think, going into 2018, unless we see something great improvement in prices here, because as I mentioned earlier, I think our expenditure is going to be a little bit higher. If, grain prices stay like what they are, I think it's going to be another tough year going into 2018. So I'm hoping farmers have been figuring out how to deal with this and make a go of it, because, it's probably going to take a major drought in some part of the world before our grain prices really jump back up again.
Noting, though, that producers over the last couple of years have, by the same token, made some adjustments. So they just need to keep rowing in that direction, basically.
Yeah, farmers obviously, they adjust as need to, and I think they've been doing a good job of that. Certainly trying to manage your cash to get through, even though we don't have net farm income to support it. We need, farmers still need to come up with cash to meet their debt payments and family living here. And one of the ways they've been doing that is by controlling expenditure. Certainly, they haven't bought near as much machinery. So, farmers are making a go of it. They've done that in the past, and I have full confidence they can do that in the future as well.
Very well. Well, we appreciate you coming over and lending your thoughts to what the USDA had to say about farm income and the numbers it put forth yesterday in its report. Thanks, Greg. We'll talk again soon.
All right, thanks.
Research and Extension agricultural economist who specializes in farm management at K-State. That's Gregg Ibendahl. Once more, the USDA offering up those numbers on farm income as it looks ahead to its Ag Outlook Forum early in 2018 and some of the key indicators from that report. This is Agriculture Today, and we'll be back on the K-State Radio Network. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and welcome back. Agricultural agencies and interests here in Kansas the last several years have been directly engaged in what are called animal disease outbreak exercises, and these are quite involved and quite important when it comes to biosecurity of our livestock production in this state. Another one of these is set to take place just a few weeks from now in mid-December. We've brought by now from the Kansas Department of Agriculture the Emergency Management Coordinator with the KDA, Sandy Johnson, to let us know not only what's coming up here in mid-December, Sandy, but to talk in general terms about these exercises and what they are designed to accomplish. But these tend to be pretty big undertakings, don't they?
Yeah, they've grown over the years. We started back in 2009. We did a pretty limited scale 4-hour exercise with the state of Oklahoma. Took a few years off as we merged with the Animal Health Department, moved to Manhattan, refined our plans because we did learn a lot back in 2009. So every year starting in 2013, since, we've been doing large, I would say they've transitioned from functional exercises to full scale. So we actually deploy veterinarians to premises in Kansas to do investigations. These are notional. We don't have the disease, but that participating industry is saying, "Hey, come show us how this is done." And we use them to collect the information, see how long things take and those types of things. But a lot of our challenges is about information management. So having people deployed to the field while we have our team set up in Manhattan is super helpful. And so we've been doing that for, like I said, the last 5 years. We've evolved to now this full-scale exercise. Each year we've grown with more industry participants, which is great because having actual personnel from dairies and feed yards and zoos and other animal industry type organizations is super helpful that we don't have to fake the data. So we actually know where those gaps are when we're done. So we've learned a lot, and we'll keep doing them for as long as we can.
And it ought to be intuitive to anybody hearing about this, but the objective here is to simply learn more about this state's preparedness and everybody that might be involved in the response to an outbreak.
Sure. I mean, we evaluate ourselves. It is pretty much self-evaluated. It's not hard to figure out after a couple of days of going through a notional outbreak of what didn't work so well. And so each year we write an after-action report and an improvement plan, and pretty much my job is to spend most of that year correcting the things that we found, the things that are in our control. So each year we get a little better at it. We're able to do things a little quicker. We're able to share information more holistically. I think a lot of, everybody says every exercise you find out your problem is communications. We this year have added a tool called Simulation Deck as a result of last year's exercise and previous ones where our communicators don't really get to do news releases and social media because we don't want to scare anyone. That will be the time someone forgets to say this is an exercise and people think we have an actual outbreak going on. Right. So this year we're using a tool that will help simulate social media and bloggers and TV and radio. We're pretty excited about that. That'll give us a chance to respond to what the public would be saying. And the other option is we have a lot of people who want to observe the exercises, but coming to Manhattan and walking around, it's okay. But you don't really understand everything that's going on if you're not part of it. So this year our observers will be able to get a login to this software, and they'll be able to watch the public-facing piece of what an outbreak looks like in Kansas for a few days. And so they'll see what a zoo would be posting or what, a feed yard conglomerate, what questions they're getting and what they're saying, and same with dairies or milk processors. So, I think this year that'll be a very great tool for us to share with our folks who want to sit in their office and play or the people across the nation that can't be in Manhattan. But it'll also be a great test for our communicators. See, are we getting that message out? Are people repeating our message? K-State Communications will be playing as well. So we end up really getting to test some things we haven't gotten to test in the past.
As a matter of fact, building up to this exercise taking place the 18th through the 20th of December, you just recently, a couple of days back, as a prelude to the actual event, had a tabletop exercise that walked participants through this, right?
Yeah, so each year since we've been doing this so long, as we get good at something, we try and move past that and go on another day to see what our actions would be maybe on day 4 or 5 of an outbreak in North America. So what we find, though, is when we start 3 days in, a lot of people are a little confused on what happened in the last 3 days. So this year we did a tabletop sort of demonstration where our leadership team walked through what Kansas Department of Agriculture and some of our partner agencies would be doing the first 3 days. So the first 3 days of an outbreak in Canada. And then it evolves to some other states. And we ended with an investigation going on in Kansas. And so our exercise will start on December 18th with those results. We will still send veterinarians out in December, but we'll have one under our belt to keep our team busy in Manhattan while we're sending out field veterinarians.
Presumably you've emergency responders tied into this very deeply.
Yes. So we use a lot of state agency partners. KDOT and the Highway Patrol are highly involved with us because of the movement controls or restrictions that we would put in place during an outbreak. Local folks, yesterday we had a few people from some counties that are going to be playing in our exercise in December to give them an idea of this is what's happened so far. And those county personnel will normally be from Public Works, law enforcement, emergency management, if they have consulting veterinarians, public health. So we definitely, it's an all hands-on-deck kind of approach. And we do a lot of training with these folks during the year. But the real intent is as we find an interested industry participant, we go to that county and say, they're wanting to participate with us. are you wanting to join us as well? And we almost unanimously get, of course we will. They understand the importance of agriculture in their counties. We also have some national level interest in play in our exercises, some national industry associations. USDA from Riverdale, Maryland will be participating with us this year. Our USDA folks here in Kansas. And then we have several other states that are going to also participate in a much smaller way than us, but their state veterinarians or their ag department commissioners or secretaries will participate in some phone calls with us and USDA to sort of simulate what this would look like if it was in multiple states at the same time.
Mm-hmm. This is, in fact, something that you have to at least preserve in part the element of surprise here, not disclose all details of the exercise in advance, so we won't get into too much. But what will take place in respect to any real-life actions, such as interruptions of transportation and so forth, will those be part of this?
Normally, a lot of those activities are done in the 3-day period that we just tabletopped yesterday. We've done them in the past. They're well received by industry. People like the fact that we're actually doing something to protect the Kansas herd and that we're training individuals on how to do that. But most of the activities that will be happening live during the December portion of the exercise will involve outbreak investigation. So veterinarians will be dispatched to locations based on industry groups that have said, I want to participate. So I think we have several zoos, a dairy, a feed yard. Investigations will occur at those locations. We even have a milk processing plant, actually, that the product that they ship out is not pasteurized. So that would fall under our movement restrictions. And so as we work with these individuals, the companies, and then the county, we'll have people there in those locations, the communicating back to the Department of Agriculture. They get the opportunity to see what an investigation looks like, not just the taking the samples out of the animals, but the tracing activities that go on with where do the animals come from, as we're trying to figure out how the disease is spreading from location to location. So they get to see kind of what paperwork they have and, or what they don't have, which is usually a case where we're not sure if they came from a sale barn, then how did they get here and where were they before? And so they get to see the complications of all of that and how it really does slow down a response. Also, we get the advantage of seeing how some of our tools work or don't work. And so we've been spending, since last year, a lot of time on some of our communication, our data collection, the way we share information just within our team and with counties and other industry participation. So by doing it for several days and by including industry, it really does give us a more realistic look than if we were just to play for a few hours or if we weren't using actual industry. Yeah. We're so lucky to have, dairies or feed yards that are willing to do this with us for a day or two.
Well, you're putting the finishing touches on the preparations for the actual exercise, Sandy, but just to stress once again the importance of this overarching effort, not just this year but in years past, in readying Kansas livestock sector and those who serve it in the event of an unfortunate outbreak of an animal disease. These are utterly vital efforts, aren't they?
Yes, I think it's a valuable endeavor that we're undertaking. And the fact that we just learn so much and are able to share that with other states as well, I think it's a service we're doing to the livestock industry, but we know how important it is, and that's why we're here.
Well, it's great work as always, and it's just a little over 2 weeks away. So we wish you and all of those involved in this exercise the best in not only pulling it off, but gleaning the valuable information from it here in the very near future. So, Sandy, congratulations to this point on putting this together, and we'll talk with you again and see how it went post-exercise.
Right. Sounds great.
Thank you for coming over. She is Sandy Johnson, Emergency Management Coordinator with the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Again, the KDA is overseeing what is now an annual and statewide foreign animal disease exercise, and this latest edition is set for Monday through Wednesday, December the 18th through the 20th. You're listening to Agriculture Today. More is coming your way in a moment here on the K-State Radio Network.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128-plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
This is the K-State Radio Network, and you're tuned to Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Thanks again for joining us, and today's agricultural news headlines come your way now. These courtesy, in part, of DTN. Well, the head of the National Council of Farmer Cooperatives is concerned about how tax law will treat that 17% tax deduction that could pass from cooperatives through to farmers, but leave farmer cooperatives without the same financial benefit that they now receive from the Section 199 Domestic Production Activities deduction. The National Council for Farmer Cooperatives has been vocal in trying to protect that section, though the deduction would be eliminated in both the House and Senate versions of the tax bill. The 9% deduction is worth about $2 billion in deductions to farmer cooperatives nationally, some of which is retained by co-ops and some of which is passed on to cooperative members. Now, a lot of the high-speed unloaders and grain storage in the Midwest and Upper Midwest have been built as a result of the Section 199 deduction, according to the president and CEO for the National Council, Chuck Connor. If Section 199 is eliminated, he says, the cooperatives are concerned that their ability to make capital investments would be hurt. Instead of the Section 199, the Senate tax bill has that 17.4% tax deduction on pass-through income. Under that plan, farmers would receive the full benefit of that 17.4% under patronage dividends because there's no provision that would allow cooperatives to benefit from retaining some or all of that deduction. Connor said the cooperatives are working closely with other agricultural interests to come up with a suitable situation that would allow co-ops to make the decision whether to retain part or all of the deduction benefits. The 17.4 pass-through deduction would include deductions on income from partnerships, S corporations, or from being a sole proprietorship. The value of using the Section 199 at the co-op level is that it can count against the wages of the cooperative. This benefits commodity producers who may not employ many or any other people. Running some analysis of that 17.4% deduction at the farmer level, farmers in the upper income brackets may well be well off under the 17.4% as they were under the Section 199, according to Connor. He says, though, as you go down the income scale, the benefits are far less so. He says, for a struggling farmer in a lower income tax bracket, you'd have been much better off with the Section 199 than with the 17.4%. He says that's kind of their general analysis at this point. Connor added that the council position remains that Section 199 should be maintained. 3 conservation-focused organizations recently presented a major award to a southeast Kansas ranch. Todd Domer reports here that the family operation was chosen for its voluntary stewardship achievement and management of natural resources.
Lazy VJ Farms of Fredonia was presented the 2017 Kansas Leopold Conservation Award during the Kansas Association of Conservation Districts annual meeting in Wichita. Owned and managed by Rod Voorhees and his family, the cow-calf operation has a history of focusing on land health. All tillable land has been converted to permanent vegetative cover using cover crops and established cool-season plant communities that complement the native prairie ecosystem and extend the time available for quality forage grazing. The Wilson County Ranch has 2,000 contiguous acres that includes cool and warm season grasses, forbs, legumes, native timberland, and riparian areas. Rotational grazing is used on the ranch, with cattle moved to different forage varieties throughout the year to provide quality nutrition. Abundant plant diversity on the Lazy VJ provides excellent wildlife habitat. These land stewardship success stories earned Lazy VJ and the Voorhees family the $10,000 award and crystal depicting renowned conservationist Aldo Leopold. The Kansas Leopold Award is presented by the Sand County Foundation, Ranchland Trust of Kansas, and the Kansas Association of Conservation Districts. Kansas is one of 12 states where Leopold Conservation Awards are presented annually. I'm Todd Domer.
And you're listening to Agriculture Today. Next up for you, this week's edition of the Kansas Soybean Update. With that, as always, is Greg Akagi. Greg?
Carrie Ebert is joining us. She is one of the co-chairs for the upcoming 2018 Women Managing the Farm Conference. Carrie, the month of February is coming up on us for that annual Women Managing the Farm Conference.
We're really excited. The program is coming together for February. We've got a very good lineup of keynote speakers and breakout sessions for this year's conference that will start with some couple of pre-conference sessions on February 14th that are optional, and then we will start the full conference on Thursday morning, and we'll run all day Thursday, the 15th of February, and until right after lunch on Friday, the 16th.
And it will be at the Hilton Garden Inn in Manhattan. And this year's focus is maximizing my influence, farm, community, and consumers as well.
We have a tremendous committee of women and some men who get together and help plan this. It's a great team of ag associations and individuals based on, all of our observations from the last few years. That was a topic that really resonated with folks was, maximizing our influence. We know that women have an influence, that agriculture has an influence, but we also know that with more and more folks being further and further removed from the farm, that women farmers are not the average person in the United States. So we've carved out a few days to learn and to focus just on women and issues that relate to farming in general. It's not just women's issues, it's the entire gamut of farm issues from production to consumption.
Now, there's an early bird registration that people can sign up for?
So through the 15th of December, we'll offer a $140 early bird registration after the 15th, so starting the 16th of December and through the 2nd of February, the regular registration rate is $160. So you can save $20 if you register early. All of this information is available at our website, and it's all one word, womenmanagingthefarm.com. And there's a Facebook page.
Type in Women Managing the Farm. And the dates, once again, February 15th and 16th, with a couple of pre-conference dates on February the 14th for the Women Managing the Farm Conference at the Hilton Garden Inn in Manhattan. That is Carrie Ebert, who serves as one of the co-chairs for the 2018 Women Managing the Farm Conference. She's been our guest on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission.
Greg Akagi there. Thanks, Greg. Coming up after our final break, this week's K-State Horticulture segment with a definite seasonal bent to it. You're listening to Agriculture Today. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. This Agriculture Today closes out with our weekly K-State Horticulture segment. What could be more timely than to talk the preferred ornamental flower for this Christmas season? That is the poinsettia. Some thoughts on caring for those poinsettias with Ward Upham joining us, horticulturist with K-State Research and Extension. Ward, folks may not be fully familiar with the history behind the poinsettia and how it became a Christmas time favorite.
That's right. It actually was something that was used to celebrate Christmas in Mexico, but it wasn't brought up to the United States until 1828. And it was brought up by a man named Joel Poinsett, and he was our first ambassador to Mexico. And he brought some cuttings back and grew them in his greenhouse in South Carolina and then shared them with all of his friends and some businesses as well, and that's what got the whole thing started.
And it is a native plant to Mexico, right?
It certainly is, and there it's a 15-foot shrub, deciduous shrub. But here, of course, we grow it as just a house plant.
We want to share some thoughts here on shopping for, selecting a poinsettia, and you would urge folks to strive for a fresh plant.
That's right. And so what most people think are the flowers of the poinsettia actually are not. They're bracts. They're the modified leaves of that plant. The flowers are actually at the base of those bracts. those colored bracts, and they'll be kind of a little yellow color. What you look for are ones that haven't shed a lot of pollen yet. They're going to be fresher than those that have. So what pollen looks like is just a yellow dust. And so if it doesn't have a lot of that, then it's going to be fresher than one that does.
Now, if the pollen has been shed, it's not a huge deal, is it, or is it?
No, it's really not. I mean, it used to be poinsettias. If you could get them to last through Christmas, you're doing really well. Well, with the newer varieties, you're not going to have any problem getting them through the Christmas season. And so they may not last quite as long if they've shed a lot of pollen, but still they should last through Christmas.
Beyond freshness, plant quality, looking over those bracts to make sure that they're fairly well intact, so forth.
Yeah, make sure that there is no dropping leaves, no drooping leaves. Make sure that the bracts are fully colored, all that type of thing. You may also want to look on the underside of the leaves, make sure there's no insects, and then check the soil as well. Make sure that it's moist but not waterlogged, and you should be fine.
Well, then, again, because of their sensitivity to colder temperatures, one wants to handle these with quite great care as they take them from the retail outlet and haul them home.
That's right, because if you get that poinsettia below 50 degrees for any length of time, it can damage it.
Any length of time, right?
Yeah, it doesn't take long, and so it's a good idea to have them either inside a sleeve. If you get them from a florist, they'll have a sleeve for you, or have them covered in some way so that they don't contact that cold air that can damage them.
And that means to the vehicle, from the vehicle indoors, and then to their holiday spot in the home. And again, that's pretty important where you place them in terms of their extended health.
That's right. So what you want to look for is a place in the home that has very bright indirect light and away from drafts. In other words, it doesn't matter whether it's a cold draft or a warm draft. So cold draft, like next to a door, you want to avoid, or next to a heat register, you also want to avoid. And so just some place where they have bright indirect light but don't have drafts.
What about other means of care here once you've placed the poinsettia where you want it in the home, where it's going to thrive nicely? You have some standard needs here to take care of, right?
Yeah, temperature is one of those. And so day temperature is 65 to 75 is really good for these. Night temperature, probably not much below 60. They are a little bit sensitive to root rot. And so if you get too low temperatures at night, that can lead to that problem. And so just try to keep temperatures above 60. In most of our houses, that's not a problem. And so they really are not that hard to take care of because they like the same temperatures we do. The other thing you need to watch is watering. They are sensitive to either over or under watering. If you underwater, you're going to get some wilt. If you get some wilt, you're probably going to get some leaf loss, and possibly even some bract loss, those colored bracts. If you overwater, then you're going to set them up for root rot. And again, root rot is going to be the same as if you didn't have enough water. They're going to wilt. And so you just want to make sure that you water them correctly. And the way to water them correctly is to stick your finger in that soil about a half-inch deep. As long as it's still moist, you don't water.
Just a half an inch.
Just half an inch. So you're still pretty shallow. When you do water, you water well. In other words, you water well enough to get some water coming out of the bottom of that pot, and then you discard it. Now, if they have foil around that pot, you need to make a hole in the bottom of that foil so that that water can flow into the saucer. But that comes in the saucer, you discard. And if you do that, if you watch all those different types of things, those poinsettias can often last for months. I mean, it kind of depends on the variety. Some are going to be tougher than others, but they can last a very long time if you want them to.
We want to come back to that in a moment. Are poinsettias poisonous?
Yeah, a lot of people think they are because they belong to the genus Euphorbia, and a lot of members of that genus are toxic, but poinsettias are not. It has been estimated that it takes 500 to 600 leaves for a 50-pound child to eat before there's any side effects. And it doesn't matter how much Dorothy Lynch you put on those. It's not going to do it.
Right. So out of harm's way, probably don't want to test that theorem, though.
Yes. And as far as pets are concerned, you may have some problems with nausea, but it's not going to really cause any real problems. And so just consider them non-toxic. They don't taste good anyway, so it's not going to be a problem.
Yeah. So dispel that myth about the poisonous nature of poinsettias. It's just not so. If one is inclined to try to hold a poinsettia plant over for the upcoming year, get it going again for the next Christmas, that's a management-intensive prospect, you say?
It is. It's difficult to do. If you want to try what they need, probably about the first half of September, you need to give them 12 hours of dark every night. And so that means putting them in a closet or covering them with a box. And if you cover them with a cardboard box, you have to tape the seams with something like duct tape so that there is no light that gets in. And you do that for at least 6 weeks or at least until those bracts start to color. Mm-hmm. And then once they start to color, you can bring them out and they'll be fine. But it's not an easy process.
And you're looking at planting them outdoors when the weather warms up as well, and that requires care likewise, obviously.
It does. A lot of people will take them outside. They may put them in a larger pot, and then they'll sink that pot in the soil so you don't have to water as much. But if you do that, you have to turn it a quarter turn every week so that those roots don't go down into the soil. Mm-hmm. And then when it's time to bring them in September, you can bring them in.
Nothing wrong with that if you want to commit the time and effort to it, but be aware of those requirements is your point here, Ward.
That's right. And most people are going to be better off just discarding this year's plant and getting a new one for next year.
And Ward, as always, we appreciate the input.
You bet.
He's Ward Upham, horticulturist with K-State Research and Extension, and he's with us regularly on our weekly horticulture segment. With that, our Thursday edition comes to a close. As always, thanks for listening in. Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.